This podcast is sponsored by the Tollington Arms on Hornsey Road, a bubbly pub with a Thai kitchen home to thousands of Arsenal fans every season. Open daily from noon.
Hello and welcome to a Gooner Ramble podcast special. I'm your host Giles, and joining me today is my sidekick, partner in crime, Akhil. How you doing, mate? You alright?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Looking forward to your vacation?
Oh, I am. Yeah, I'm literally packing my shorts as we speak.
Good
for
stuff.
A bit of Jamaican rum.
Good man. I don't know if you saw pictures of Tim Stillman this morning, but he looked really pasty. He looked like he was actually in the cover on the beach. I was thinking, he needs a bit of sun.
He's got that pale skin, you see, 5 minutes out there and he's done.
Indeed. All right, so joining us today, we've got three very special guests. I'm going to start by announcing and introducing Tim Payton of the AST. How you doing, Tim? Thanks for coming on.
Hello there. Hello. Good
stuff. We've also got Geoff Arsenal. How you doing, mate? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, Giles, for inviting me.
No worries. And also Matt Scott from... You've heard him on various channels, including Talk Sport. He contributes to Sky. He's inside World Football. Matt, thank you for coming on and joining us this evening.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just wanted to start by getting all your thoughts on the worst kept secret in football, which was the club announcing Arsene Wenger's 2-year contract extension. I'll start by asking you, Akhil, why did it take so long for the announcement to be made?
Well, I think it got into a bit of a PR story in the end. I mean, we started the season well. I mean, minus the first game. Our two best players, Sanchez and Ozil, were playing very well, and everything was quite rosy. So you would have thought the club missed a bit of a chance there, that if they were going to announce it, that would have been the time. Then once results started to go downwards, and I'm thinking of when we went to Everton and City, and then again Watford and Chelsea, they kind of never became a right time. And then obviously we lost to Bayern Munich very badly. And then the protests happened, and it just, there wasn't an opportunity then for the club from a PR point of view to announce it, because there would have been uproar. I mean, there already has been uproar, but that's only on social media. Whereas if you had a game this Saturday, you would have had uproar on social media from some, and you would have also had uproar maybe in the stands, maybe outside, etc. So the club sort of just didn't have an opportunity to announce it because the results weren't very good. And then obviously they've sort of announced it at the end of the season where, fans will now have time to go off on their holidays, to do things non-football related. And I guess, again, from a PR point of view, the club will want to try and re-sign their two best players, get a few in, and hope that, people have a different attitude come pre-season in July and August.
Over to you, Geoff. I mean, why... what's your thoughts on it, and why do you think why do you think Wenger? I assume you are a Wenger man. Obviously, we all know you're a Wenger man. Why do you think he still is the right man for the job?
I just think that it gives us continuity. I think that any team that are not haven't got the funds to operate like Chelsea, Manchester City, and Manchester United, where they can chop and change managers every 2 or 3 years and still have some success. I think a team has got to really build and have 3 and 4 and 5 years, and he gives us that continuity. I just think that, no doubt we're going to go into it later on, but all the top managers around the world have said he is still a top manager, and I'm not sure that there's anybody out there at this present moment that can take Arsenal in the quickest time to competing for the Premier League again. I really don't. And really, you might call out other managers like the kid at Atletico and Allegri as well. But you don't know how they're going to manage in the Premier League. You see Pep come in and he hasn't had the greatest of seasons. All right, Jose, he's been here before and he's won 2 cups at Manchester United. But I think Manchester United are going to be a little bit disappointed that they didn't really kick on for the Premier League. And there's other managers as well that have struggled. Klopp has come in, hasn't really done too much. It's not easy, you know. So I think he's the best man for the job at this current time to take us on for another 2 years.
Tim, over to you. I'm just looking at what's been read in the chat box here, so hopefully it's going to be tasty discussion. Tim, over to you. You've heard what Geoff has said. You've heard what Akhil said. He says there's nobody else better to take the job on. There was a lot of delays, and you know why do you think there was so much delay? And do you agree with Geoff as in he's the best man to take the job on?
Well, if you're completely incompetent and disorganised as a club, and you don't get round to it until the 1st of June, it might be the case that you've got no choice but to carry on with who's there. Because what you do if you're a proper club trying to get better is you're talking to Allegri in January, so it's all lined up. Do we think Chelsea found Conte on the 1st of June? Do we think Manchester City only thought, that Pep Guardiola on the 1st of June? Do we think Liverpool waited on Klopp, or did they see him leave Dortmund and actually expedite the sacking of the manager they had to bring them in? If you just sit on your arse and do nothing, then yeah, it probably is better to have Arsene Wenger than be scrabbling around on the 1st of June with no one out there. But if you're a properly run club going out there, you cannot tell me that there is not a manager with the credentials and the profile, if you are organised and thoughtful and planning, that you could go out and get to make Arsenal a better football club. But the reason we were paralysed in terms of decision making, and the reason the decision was only taken this week, was the absent owner, who hadn't had a phone call with the manager at all, or any discussion in all of 2017, or really with his other board members, came into the country and awarded the contract over their heads. That's why it happened on Monday like that. That's how dysfunctional the club is in terms of how it's run.
Matt, over to you. Why do you think the board? I mean, there was rumours from back channels that people like Gazidis, people like Chips Keswick were at least reluctant to give Wenger the contract as it was, and they wanted to insert caveats and clauses and whatever other measurements to his job. Why do you think that it's turned out the way it has? And do you agree with the rest that actually that without any succession planning, this is the only choice they could have made?
Well, Arsene Wenger is the best man for the job if you are Stan Kroenke, because Arsene Wenger has proven that he's prepared to operate under certain financial constraints that other managers with a great deal more ambition would not be prepared to work with. And that's why he has got the job, because Stan Kroenke sees Arsenal, as he said in his statement, he sees Arsenal as an investment. He is an investor in Arsenal, and therefore Arsenal's cash pile has to remain undiminished. I'd be very surprised if we go into the start of next season with less than £200 million in the bank, whatever we spend this summer. So it was always completely academic argument that Arsene Wenger was ever going to not have that contract put underneath his nose, and that he wouldn't sign it, because he does truly love the football club. He loves being king of the world. He doesn't ever have to change his ways. He will not change his ways. He will be Arsene Wenger because that's the man, that the owner, who is himself autocratic around the club. He doesn't consult with his board. He doesn't want his board to do. He just wants the decisions that he wants and Arsene Wenger wants to be the way that the club is run. You ask about his contract. I suspect, I don't have any insights into this, but I suspect and I hope that what has happened is the detail in that contract where he has to be the highest paid person within the football club. I hope that clause was taken out. I hope that was what led to the delay in this. I hope that that's the case, because if Arsenal are going to attract really, really top players into the football club, then they can't afford to pay, the kind of salaries that Ozil and Sanchez are asking for, when the manager's salary has to be hiked on top of that as well. I hope that this talk of a £2 million pay rise in the contract is in recompense for the removal of that clause within his contract.
Tim?
I agree entirely with what Matt's just said there. The reason that's what just happened is because of the mutual benefit alliance that exists between Kroenke and Wenger. And to me, and this is part of the problem, Arsene Wenger loves being Arsenal manager more than he actually really wants Arsenal to be the very best club in the world. Because if he's prepared to accept Kroenke not investing and not pushing us as strong as he can, but that's the trade-off that he gets to keep being manager, it's being loyal to yourself more than it is to the club. We've got caught in the dynamic of that relationship. But, you know, I really don't believe, and I think most of the others are here, if it wasn't for Stan Kroenke, if the board who are London-based, if the board who go to the games and are more aware of what's going on had taken a decision without Kroenke's involvement, I don't think Arsene Wenger would be manager today. I really believe that. I know that the two independent non-execs felt his time had come, and we all know that Ivan Gazidis had been pushing very hard, including using media channels, to talk about a director of football. You only talk about a director of football at Arsenal if you want Arsene Wenger to go, because he's made it quite clear that he won't tolerate one or work with one. So in promoting one, you're kind of pushing your manager out or finding a way to move him on. And I think that we're going to pay a very heavy price for this civil war and the splits that are in the club at the moment.
Geoff, what are your thoughts on the statement that Gazidis made at the time to the fans forum about there being a catalyst for change, and obviously people in the board, we don't know exactly who they are, you know, pushing for, you know, a support network around Wenger. Do you think they were right? Do you think he was out of order for making that statement? Do you think the board, whoever they may be, were wrong for sort of wanting Wenger to make good on his assertion that he can reinvent himself by adding layers to the support network around him?
I'll tell you what I think it is. I think a lot of the supporters, and no doubt some of the board members, I think it was 50% of them, or almost, that was having those thoughts that maybe they should remove Arsene Wenger, and that the other half of them was firmly in Wenger's camp. But what I think's happened is, over the course of the time, Arsenal fans have they're just tired. They want change for the sake of change. Now, you know, that's fair enough. I can run with that. That's all well and good. But I don't honestly. I think when push comes to shove, I think that when I sit down, they've got whether they press the button or not, I think they're going to go on Arsene Wenger's side, simply because, you know, just because he's been at the club so long. It doesn't mean you just got to remove him just for the sake of it. He's been very, very successful at Arsenal. He's definitely Arsenal's most successful manager. I think out of the whole of the trophy haul that Arsenal had in their history, I think he's won a third of them, or just around about that figure. He's won 3 FA Cups in the last 4 years. Now, that's very, very successful for a team like Arsenal Football Club when you're coming up against the other bigger teams with bigger budgets. And that's really how it is. I think it was a little bit unfair. I think he was maybe pandering to put a bit of pressure on Arsene Wenger at the time. I'm talking about Gazidis now. But you know full well that Arsene Wenger is he will not work under a director of football. And it all depends, like he said, you know, what does a director, he was asking the question more or less, what do you want a director of football to do? If you want him to pick the football team and buy football players, that's not for a director of football. That's for a manager. That's in my opinion anyway. I think that's how it should be run. It really is as simple as that.
Do you think though that, okay, Tim said Wenger's done it more for him rather than the future of the club. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that he's signed him because he loves being manager of the football club and he's invested 21 years? And there's no real, some people will contend that there's no real sort of evidence that over a 38 game season, Wenger has the nous to outsmart the others and win us the championship. I mean, some people, Phil Wall in the Standard today said that, 6 game FA Cup is one thing. You can't do it over a 13 game period in the Champions League, and he certainly can't do it over a 38 game period in the league. I mean, that's where, managers are measured, and he's fell well short of it. So what makes you think that he can do it, and his appointment really is for the good of the future of the club?
I'm not, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Arsenal to win the league over the next 3 and 4 years because of what I've already spoken about. Manchester City have already gone out and spent the best part of £150 million. And since in 2017, I mean. Now, that's the kind of might that we're up against. See, the level of expectancy at Arsenal with their fans, over the course of the season, it turns into entitlement. We're not entitled to win the Premier League anymore, mate. We're not entitled to win the Champions League. Arsenal, unless we get proper investment where we can compete with them guys, that give the £300,000 a week to these top players, we are maybe going to be like a cup team. It's unfortunate, but until you've got to get it, you've got to get your head around it, because otherwise you're going to go into the season and you're going to be disappointed all the time, unless he can do what he has done before and built a team and to go on an upset, which is what we did before.
Yeah, it would be an upset for Arsenal to win the league, I'm afraid. We're going back 12 years to our last 13 years, to our last title win. And that was so spectacular and still to live so long in our memories in the invincible season. But that was at a time when effectively the Premier League was a duopoly between its two richest clubs, Arsenal and Manchester United. For the previous 10 years, nobody else had really had a look in to speak of. So that was then. This is now. We're talking now of a pluralist Premier League with very many credible challengers for the title, all of whom have pretty equivalent resources, others of whom are prepared to apply those resources more effectively and enthusiastically than Arsenal and its owner are prepared to. So they are getting better results on the football pitch. Moreover, Arsenal's reduced resources are repeatedly affected by the injuries that they suffer. And I mean, I've done a lot of data-backed research into this. And if you lose players through injury, you effectively, it's a great level of the injury, a huge leveler. And we have the worst, head and shoulders the worst injury record in the Premier League. So Wenger is actually performing extremely well with the resources at his disposal.
Let me
finish here. I would contend that he doesn't push hard enough for the proper resources to be put his way. The board and certainly the owner set a strategy where the club doesn't expend enthusiastically to resource the club properly to win the biggest titles, and therefore he doesn't win them. He does place higher up than he ought to place. He places one place higher up than he ought to place when all things are considered, with the value of the squad and the injuries that are suffered. Repeatedly, Arsenal this season they were for the first time one place below where they should have been. But on average, over the last 5 seasons, Arsenal have placed one place above where they should have done in the aggregate each season on average. Now that's the question. There is Wenger right or wrong? Well, it's irrelevant, because what matters is the board strategy, the owner's strategy. And for as long as we have this owner, Arsenal will not win things. To my mind, he is a millstone around the club's neck, the way that he wants this club to be run. I ask, why does Arsene Wenger, this man who used to be sick, used to get off to stop the bus to vomit when he was at Nancy after his team had got beaten, he hated losing so much. What is it that now has made him swallow that vomit? What is it that has made him now content to not compete? Because the club could, if it wanted to, compete. It really could use those resources properly. And instead, rather than pushing to buy N'Golo Kante when they had a deal agreed with Leicester, rather than pushing to pay him the wages that he wanted to come to our football club and would have come in preference to Chelsea, he goes and buys Granit Xhaka, who is, to my mind, versus Kante second rate. And that is a big question for me. Why does he do it? What I heard that a contract had been signed months and months and months ago before this announcement. What was that contract? Does he have a contract with Kroenke Sports and Entertainment? Is there a contract for Arsene Wenger to look after the one from Arsenal to look after the team sheet and one from KSE to look after the balance sheet? It's a question I constantly ask myself. Why is he swallowing that vomit? Why does he do this? I don't know. I've got no proof. No one's ever going to tell me the answer to that question. But, you know, it's one that I keep asking myself.
Tim, you want to come back on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll come back to the point. I mean, I do agree with Matt that we could be more aggressive with the resources that we have, and there's got to be question mark about why Wenger doesn't demand that they get used and so on. But let's not underplay. He's got huge resources at his disposal now. He's running a wage bill of £200 million. It's right up there with all of the elite clubs. He's got far more firepower than Bayern Munich, far more firepower than Atletico Madrid, far more firepower than Monaco. He hasn't got out the last 16 of the Champions League for 7 years. I think there's 16 or 17 clubs across Europe now that have done that. It's underperforming the seeding year in, year out. Look, any one year you might get a Bayern Munich in the round of 16, and you've got to be realistic. You're not going to get past them that often. It's for 7 years in a row, isn't it? It's where that statistically averages out to failure. And your point about the Premier League, yes, is basically delivering to budget. What do I call delivering to budget? Average. Fine, par. In golf, that would be par. What you want, what you're looking for when you spend £10 million a year on a manager, you want a manager that will extract a bit more out of the budget and take you higher up. Like Pochettino has done. Sixth biggest budget, coming second. Or like it was a bit of fluke, but Leicester did it. At the end of the day, no matter how much money you spend, you only put 11 players on the pitch. I think Phil said that very well in the Evening Standard piece today. And there's no excuse whether you're paying them £100 million a year across the wage bill or £200 million a year across the wage bill for them going out and not giving a shit, like they have in several games for Arsenal this year. So I'd kind of half agree, Matt, on the broader bit, but don't let him off the hook. That's a huge budget that he's got to spend there, and he ought to be extracting a bit more out of what he is spending. And I also agree he ought to be pushing the club a bit more to take the handbrake off in the transfer market.
Geoff, do you agree? I mean, that Kroenke is kind of like a millstone. He's the one that's holding Wenger back without, they set a budget, and maybe they don't give him as much support as maybe other owners give their managers.
I said it about 15 months ago when we really actually realised that this financial fair play thing was just up in the air and it was a free-for-all again. It's until Arsenal, until Stan either puts his money in or sells to somebody that will put the money in, we are just going to have this same thing that's going to happen all over again, no matter what manager we get in. And sometimes I think we'll finish lower than what we have done. I can't see any change until Stan does something. Something has got to happen where we get the proper investment. And I mean, Tim mentions Pochettino. Everyone's talking about Pochettino. Yes, he's done fantastic. He looks a great manager. But what you got to remember, in 4 years, Poch has managed to win 3 Manager of the Month awards. In 4 years, Arsenal's won 3 FA Cups.
Axe, do you want to shift?
That's brilliant. By the way, let's give that the credit it deserves.
Well, it's a fact. It's a point of fact. People are talking about Pochettino as he's some maestro. I mean, it's the facts are there for you.
Absolutely.
Anybody want to come back to that point before I move the conversation on? No? Go ahead.
No. Yeah, I think that's the last word, isn't it?
Axe, Kroenke came out in a statement and said that his ambition is to win the Premier League, Champions League, go take us to the next level. I think Gazidis also said that their stated ambition is to put the club in a position where they're winning the Premier League, where we're competing to win in Europe and pushing forward. Do you think that, do you believe that they really, really are doing their most to ensure that Arsenal are at least competing at that level? Or do you think it's just lip service? I know that apparently the club said there's, Wenger and Gazidis did some sort of root and branch review audit of the processes, but I mean, how much do we believe that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because if you ask probably 10 fans, I would say 8 would probably say it is lip service. But I mean, we do have to remember that Arsenal did spend about £90 million last summer. So I know I get Matt's point about putting money in, but money certainly was spent. Was it spent well? Was it not spent well? That's an argument for a different day because I think at times a few of them have looked good, and at times a few of them haven't. And that's going to be interesting this summer as well to see what actually happens. And I think of a line that Arsene Wenger said in 2011, and he said that if you get rid of Fabregas and Nasri, you can't convince people you're an ambitious club, or something along those lines. And I actually think that's now come around again, that if we don't keep Ozil or Sanchez, then I'm not sure how we convince anyone, fans, other clubs, anyone, that we're an ambitious club. So I think Stan Kroenke's statement about wanting to win the Premier League, it really can only be backed up in the transfer market, in our own contract negotiations, because if we lose out there, then it just seems like words, because there's no real backup there. So it will be interesting to see what happens this summer. I mean, that's the other thing. You look at signings, I think last summer was typical Arsene Wenger in terms of his £2 million Rob Holding signing was probably the signing you look at as the best signing all summer. Whereas his 35 million Mustafi, jury's probably still out. Xhaka, jury's still out, despite him ending the season really well and having a great cup final. But actually, the Rob Holding signing was probably the Arsene Wenger that we know, because he's been absolutely fantastic. So there's that showing ambition, but there's also, using Arsene Wenger's mind, his eye, to actually sort of do what he does, along with showing that ambition and buying those bigger players.
Tim?
Yeah, on signings, I totally agree. And it's not just about spending the money, it's about spending it ruthlessly and well and efficiently. And that is why Gazidis was right to try and get the club overhauled, and why I'm concerned things won't change. Look at the Mustafi signing. The dithering over that could well have cost us the points against Liverpool in the opening game, which we came 1 point behind Liverpool. Now, I know there's a whole season and points won and lost there, but we were not ready on the opening day of the season while they dithered and haggled over a signing. Another example, Perez. You spend £20 million, if you include the wages, on a player that he doesn't really want to use. That's a false economy. It'd have been better to take 50% of that 20 million and add it onto the Suarez bid. So you actually, rather than having 2 strikers worth 25 million each, you don't really add up to enough. Add it together and buy big. And I think, was it Matt already covered, Kante versus Xhaka, a swing which could well have been the difference between which team won the title this year. So you've not only got to spend the money, you've got to have people that Arsenal's failure comes in, not so much the identifying the player, but the execution of the transfer. We all know that. And that's a culture as much as the money being spent.
Do you think, Tim, and I'll also bring in Matt as well here, do you think that the fact that we are, we're kind of a bit hit and miss in the transfer market is down to the fact that Wenger, Dick Law has to go to Wenger for a final say so. We don't really, I think our chief transfer negotiator, I don't know if he's Spanish or whatever, I heard that he's been headhunted by some Spanish teams, so he might be leaving. Or was it the head of recruitment or scouting supposed to be leaving? So again, we're coming back to infrastructure, people network, support network around him. That needs to be upgraded. That needs to be modernized. And as long as that isn't modernized, he's not really going to be making the best judgments in the transfer market. I think he already said a few weeks ago that he kind of alluded to the scouting network not being as quick off the mark as others. Is there anything in that, Matt?
Well, look, the last summer you saw a lot of clubs do their business very early. It was all done and dusted as far as they were concerned, long in advance of the season. While we, as Tim has pointed out quite rightly, we were spending far too long dithering over transfers that should have been executed a long time before. So yes, I mean, I think there is. It's this penny scrimping issue. I mean, and then you end up bang on about the false economies. You end up overpaying for players. You know, they didn't want Lucas Perez at the start of the summer, but because they got to the point where it became obvious that they needed somebody, just a body, and there was a player there that was pretty much the only person that they had a look at that was within their price range, they ended up overpaying for him. There's no way he's a £16 million striker. Absolutely no way. I mean, he's probably worth half that. And Arsenal, when they offload him this summer, will be lucky to achieve half of what they've paid for him on top of the wages as well, which, we barely got a look in this season because Wenger knows that he was not good enough. And he bought a player there just to try and keep people happy because people were calling out for signing. So it's a complete mess. It does feel like there is far too little strategy. I've often, personally, I've often, for a very long time, been saying that the Wenger's refusal to delegate properly is his greatest flaw. Arsene is still running this football club. To me, he reminds me of the guy who set up EasyJet, Hadjianu, who run EasyJet like a startup throughout its period as a FTSE 100 company, and it grew because of Hadjianu's great successes, and we've got that with Arsenal. Wenger has turned Arsenal into this European super club with a £60 million, 60,000 seat stadium, which unfortunately he still runs like the Arsenal of 1996 that he joined. He refuses to grow his power, to shrink his power base and grow the level of delegation that's required so that individuals have key responsibilities in areas that he consumes all to himself. And I find that really frustrating about him. Tim spoke about an incompetence in the football club. It's down to the fact that this is a football club now. We are no longer a property company as we were for 10 years after moving into this stadium. We are a football club, and unfortunately, a £350 million a year football club rests on the whim, caprices, and desires of one man and one man only, who answers to a complete penny pincher at the very top. That's the dysfunction that is intrinsic to Arsenal.
Geoff, I want to bring you back in on this subject. We've heard from the guys about how we're inefficient in terms of buying and economies and whatnot. Our economy is really poor in terms of our wage bill. It's top heavy. Wenger's already said that some people will need to leave. Do you agree with that assertion? And who do you think are really in a vulnerable position in terms of their futures at Arsenal?
Well, I think there's a few of them. There's a few that was very, very much fancied at Arsenal. Jack Wilshere being one of them. I think his injuries have unfortunately killed his career, haven't they, it seems, especially at the top level. And there's going to be others that are, Ospina looks like he's looking to move on. We don't know what's happening with Szczesny, whether he's going to come back on or he's going to move him on yet. I expect one of them will stay. But there's a host of players that they've got to renew or sell on. It is my belief that Arsenal will only sell the players that they need to sell, that they want to sell. I still do believe that Sanchez and Ozil will stay. They'll have to heave up the money. Personally, I think Ozil is cool anyway. Sanchez, we hear that he's been, or his agent at least, has been causing a bit of trouble. But whatever happens with Sanchez, if he asks for £350,000 a week, I think you've got to pay him. Get that 5 years, and if we can't afford it, you can still sell him then for 60 or 70 million. At the moment, if you work out the maths, it's a no-brainer not to do that. You've got to sign him. But there are going to be changes, definitely. There's going to be a few going out, and I think they'll be replaced, hopefully, by quality players that will come in.
Matt, do we have the money to do it? I mean, let's just assume we sell Alexis Sanchez. We give Ozil 280 grand a week. Agents of other players or potential targets are thinking, well, Arsenal definitely have the money here. Are we in a position that we can give Ozil that kind of money and then give those one or two superstar signings that Wenger talked about the kind of money that really we need to offer to get somebody in to improve us to the point where we can compete. I hope that all makes sense.
Look, if you're paying £350 a week, £350,000 a week to an individual over a 5-year contract, that's a £91 million commitment over the 5 years. But the advantage of that is that you don't have to pay any transfer fees. So effectively, you're looking at a player with a value of £60 million that you're only paying £30 million over that time. So that means a 120 grand a week striker. So do we think that we can get a replacement for Sanchez who is going to be satisfied with 120 grand a week, whom we pay £60 million for? Because the maths are exactly the same. I think that if they're going to be able to get a Kylian Mbappe, then we might end up seeing the back of Sanchez because he's a younger model. He's going to be far less troublesome than Sanchez has been at times this season, and he probably will accept a much reduced salary. And, we might be able to acquire him for that kind of money. So, if that happens, then it's looking pretty good for Arsenal. I personally think that there are ways of working this transfer market. The amount of talent that's out there is far greater. It looks like that they have identified one of the most promising and exciting prospects in football. And if, as Robert Pires believes, we are going to land him, then a lot of people should, to my mind, sit back and admire the team going forward, because I think we could have something very, very exciting on our hands. And of course, if they're going to cash in on Sanchez as well, then they're going to be looking at upwards of £40 million coming in. So it would all be good business. And that's what we are now, as I keep saying. We're a business, not a football club.
Tim, very briefly, do you see Wenger being ruthless in terms of getting rid of the deadwood? Or even getting rid of one or two of Sanchez and Ozil if they refuse to sign?
Well, they'll have salary limits that they can't go beyond, partly because they're constrained by wage cap rules under the Premier League and rules about what they can pay and others are satisfied with. No, I don't think they'll be ruthless because it's not the Arsene Wenger way, but I do think there'll be turnover. I'd probably pick up on the sentiment here. What would worry me is that Sanchez goes and Ozil ends up getting paid more than he's worth because he can leverage the fact that Sanchez has gone. I mean, Ozil's a very good player and should get a very good salary, but he's not at the 300k level in terms of what he delivers over a season and the opportunity cost of what you spend elsewhere. But I said that is how I fear that it is heading on the transfer market. But more again, how are Arsenal going to have a good transfer window when they only really appear to know who their management structure is to deal with it on June the 1st? What an absolute mess. And now the players are all off on their holidays or with their other countries. That's dangerous because when they go to their other countries, they start meeting up with their colleagues who play at bigger clubs and tempt them, come and live in this city. You can have the sunshine all year and this much money and look who your colleagues will be and so on and so on. So I really fear it's going to be a difficult summer for Arsenal. They're on the back foot on 4 or 5 key player contracts before you even think of signings.
I think just to jump in there, I think it's, according to pretty much everyone, we've signed that left back, who's going to potentially play wing back. Was it from Schalke? So clearly that the managerial situation didn't really impact on that sort of a player. So
it won't at that level though, will it, Akhil?
Well, yeah, maybe
names. It's the big star names that are going to compete for the title in the Champions League that matter. That's a good solid signing, but that would happen whoever's in charge.
Yeah, but I can't see it as Arsenal have been completely quiet in the last sort of 6 months, not looking around, not putting inquiries in. I find that hard to believe because that would be very amateurish. I'm not quite sure. I mean, how much that's going to impact. And just on sort of outgoing players, I think being ruthless is one thing, but you need clubs to actually take those players. So I think of someone like Kieran Gibbs, what 50, 60,000 a week. I would say he's probably on. Now he's hardly played in a few years. He's, he used to be in the odd England squad. He hasn't been in the odd England squad. I mean, is a club really going to come in and pay 60, 70,000 for Kieran Gibbs?
Liverpool want Clichy, so Gibbs.
Yeah, maybe, but I just think it's, we've had this issue before where we've failed to offload people. We've had to send them on loan, and I just hope that's not going to happen. I do hope that we can sort of move on a few players who we think should be moved on. But being ruthless, I think it depends on sort of other clubs wanting the players as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Debussy's done a sit-down protest for 18 months.
Exactly. I mean, who's going to want Debussy at 70, 80,000 when he's hardly played for 2 months, when he's been doing more in the media than he has been on the training field? I mean, it's just people just don't want to touch him.
Indeed. Finally, I want to touch on the situation with the fans. Now, the contract's been signed. We all know what's happening now. I suppose really what we all want is for the fans and the club to move forward as one. Do we believe that can happen? Geoff, you came out, is it yesterday or today, and said, it's time for the fans to get behind the club. Do you see that as happening? Can we reconcile and can we move forward together?
Well, it is my belief that if we are going to challenge for the Premier League title, everybody's got to be singing off the same hymn sheet. We've got to all go for it together. When it's divisive, when we're all divided, and there's banners in the crowd, and the players see all that, and they see everything on social media. Don't think for 1 minute they don't notice what's going on social media. And the Wenger out protests, right?
They do.
Fair enough. Yeah, of course they do.
They do, Geoff. I mean, just to cut in there, I was at the foundation board, lucky enough to be at that, and we outright asked Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, do you know what happens on on fan TV, and do you see these banners? And he said, of course we do. He actually said that.
He watches fan TV, mate. He likes the Wenger out protest.
He likes it, didn't he? But he actually came out and said that day to us that Crystal Palace was the worst he's ever seen, and he goes, as a player, it was horrible. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so we've got to a stage now where obviously we had the protests. And it's not a Wenger in victory and a Wenger out, loss or anything like that. We just need to unite there. There is nothing that it's only going to breed more negativity. There's nothing that can come out of it if they carry on with these protests. Let's give it up now, right? Really have a go, get behind the team, and in my opinion, it's just see where it takes us. And I think if we're all together, then I think we can have a right go at it. If not, we're just going to get the same again. It's not good.
Do you think if things aren't done in the transfer market, or Wenger isn't given enough help in the transfer market this summer, then the attention will turn towards Kroenke? And obviously with Usmanov there in the background, we don't know if another bid's coming in. Matt, I don't know if you can confirm that, or if you've got any news about that. But I mean, is there a chance that fans might turn their ire on to the Kroenkes?
Well, they already have, haven't they? And it would seem to me that most sensible Arsenal fans will recognise that it's futile to call for Wenger out. You can't say no more contract now because he's in for 2 more years. So it would be pointless, as Geoff says. I think that there will be another bid at some point from Usmanov. I think that it's been dismissed in a lot of quarters as a PR stunt. I don't believe that is the case at all from conversations that I've had with people who know what's going on in his mind. So no, I think that fundamentally, my view is that this football club has gone backwards since 2006 or 7 when Kroenke joined the board. We won nothing in terms of the league over the course of that period. And I don't think that's a coincidence at all. People hide behind the stadium excuse. But this football club is making money hand over fist. But for whom?
I think going forward, it's probably good that it's the summer now, because I think people can sort of get away from football a little bit and just sort of take a moment to worry about other things. But then it's kind of up to the club. I mean, we talked about it at the start. Stan Kroenke saying we want to win the Premier League, and Ivan saying we want to win major trophies in Europe. It's now up to the club to show us that, and it's up to the club to try and keep our two best players, to add to the squad. Because I think if we do keep our two best players, we do add to the squad, I think, people could come back in the summer with a bit of optimism, with a little bit of some people still won't like it. Of course, people will still be unhappy. Of course, some people might not renew, which is obviously up to them as well. But I think if we do our job off the field, then fans will at least come back in August and think, okay, look, the club have done what they had to do. Let's see what happens now. They won't be overly, supportive of Arsene Wenger or the regime, but they might just give it a chance to see what happens. If we don't do everything off the field, if we do lose our top player, our top two players, we don't make the signings, then obviously you can imagine it. Then it could be a loss on the first day, and it could be like we've had against Villa, like we had against Liverpool. It could be like that. So then it comes down to results. But I think at the moment, it's just, let's just see what the club do off the field. And hopefully they do the stuff. And then, we start the season well and we see what happens.
You agree with all that, Tim?
Yeah, totally. We all know, look,
hey.
Fans will turn up in August in our numbers to support the team. And if the club puts out a lineup, was made available and worked well over the summer, and the manager puts out a lineup that plays well, wins more than it loses, is clearly committed, then of course fans will be behind it. But the idea that we kind of ought to rally around, a team that isn't playing well, an owner that isn't interested, a club that's been poorly run, no, that's not correct at all. If you love Arsenal, if you support Arsenal, you want Arsenal to be the best in the world, you actually show it most care and attention when you point this out and challenge it and call for it to be better. So it's all down to how the club acts and responds. They have definitely got the message the last few weeks and months that the situation isn't good enough, that fans aren't happy. They kind of put out PR that they're going to address it. It will be results they're judged by, the manager's judged by, and the mood at the club in August and September will all be dictated by the results.
I am concerned, though, on the first goalless draw at home or first bad result, that all of a sudden you'll hear them murmurings again and it'll all running back. We need to stop all that. We've got to get over it and get behind the boys because those are the times when you're going through the bad time, that's when they need support. They don't need any support once they're rolling and they're on a 12-game unbeaten run. I'm not sure that we're going to do that. I just hope that the fans can stay on board for as long as they possibly can. I'm worried about people. They don't want to be seen to be having been mistaken.
I suppose it comes down to the fact it's a very fragile treaty, isn't it, right now? I mean, it will become a very fragile treaty come the first game of the season, and a lot will depend on how we get off. Do we get off on the right foot or not? I mean, it's not like as if we've been challenging.
Can anyone think of a situation in football where a manager has been under such pressure, arguably underperformed, where the majority of the fans have wanted him gone, and that was certainly the position, in March, April, and I even think now it's probably split down the middle. There's an awful lot that don't really want him, but they're in that category. Well, he's signed for 2 years, so I reconcile with it because it makes life easier. But has anyone ever turned it around from, if you like, having lost it with the key audience so much and the results? What's the precedent of someone coming back from this situation?
Well, Sir Alex Ferguson nearly got his hat.
Yeah.
And then he went
right at the very early on. I mean, he kind of went on the cup run, didn't he? That saved him.
So won the FA Cup.
Yeah, so but in a way,
isn't that what we've just
slightly
done?
Slightly different, Matt, and it was relatively early on in his time there, wasn't it? But he certainly very rare, isn't it? And also a manager that was a manager that in his press statements of the last 2 weeks has been very critical, both about members of his own board and about some of his own supporters. Just don't recall that a precedent for that ever ending well.
Well, he is unique. So, I
know it is quite a unique situation.
It really is. So it's difficult to compare it with anything, really, because there is no one in world football like Arsene Wenger. Even Sir Alex Ferguson had creative destruction within his own setup of frequently changing the people around him, which is something that I would beg Arsene Wenger, implore him to do. Just rip it all up, rip up the template, challenge yourself, go out there and have the cojones to change things around you. Because if he's able to do that, then he's going to go a long way to inspiring the people around him and inspiring himself and challenging himself to new attainments. He's achieved so much, but what really drives him to keep going? That's what I want to know.
I think I agree with all the points there. I think we would love nothing more than for Wenger to compete and hopefully win a big title and be at the forefront of football again, rather than be a reference point as to past glories, era gone by.
But let me just come in there. I totally agree, but not for Arsene Wenger himself,
no,
because that's what I want Arsenal to achieve, and that encapsulates what I've become worried about. He wants the job for himself, and we've become an institution that's become more about the manager. And oh my God, look what he did in 2005 is amazing. But now, he is a byproduct. Of course, I want him to be successful but it's because I want Arsenal to be successful, and I feel he's now, in a way, he's become too big, and it destroys what's around him.
Indeed. We could talk forever. I could talk for a long time about this whole situation, but
Tim certainly
certainly some of us have to go to Axe, but
we can do it all again in June 2019.
Indeed. I want to thank special guests Matt, Tim, and Geoff for coming on. Thank you very much, fellas.
Cheers, guys.
And also Akhil. Catch us on all the platforms. Please like, subscribe, comment, rate us on iTunes, YouTube, the whole lot. We'll be back again soon with a review of the season. Please stay tuned for that. I've been your host, Giles. It's been a pleasure. Up your Arsenal.
Up the Arsenal.
This podcast is sponsored by the Tollington Arms on Hornsey Road, a bubbly pub with a Thai kitchen, home to thousands of Arsenal fans every season. Open daily from noon.